All right, welcome to the WatchWell Podcast. My name is Parker, and I am one of your hosts. This is my co-host, Nick. Nick, how was your week?
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's cold here. I'm sure it's cold there as
Yeah.
well, but
It
it
is
is,
freezing outside.
yeah, trying to stay warm.
And before we get started, we've got some news on our Patreon page. If you guys noticed, we've got merch. Check this out, Nick. How's this? I'm going to show you this on the camera, okay? Check this
All
out.
right. Let me see it. Yep. I like it.
Yeah.
Looks
So if you
good.
guys want to rep, we've got mugs and T-shirts and long sleeve shirts and sweatshirts. They will be available on Patreon. If you guys want to support the podcast, go ahead over to Patreon. We would really, really appreciate it. There's some things that we are super excited about in 2023. Can you imagine? Man, 2023. It's already here.
I know. Crazy.
2022. Yeah, it's just going by so fast.
I'm gonna be 36 in 2 months.
36 in 2 months.
Yeah.
I just turned 30 last November. How's that make you feel? You feel old yet?
Man.
That crazy?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool. I'm really excited for this one, Nick. Really, really excited.
Good.
Um, but your week was good.
Yeah. Great week.
Great week.
Yeah, just trying to stay inside right now. The temperature change has been crazy.
Right.
But yeah, so great week, ready to go. Ready to get this episode going.
Awesome. So initial thoughts of Avatar, The Way of Water.
The Way of Water. So, it's the same world, the same kind of foundations as the first movie. So the first thing I notice is, and you'll know this if you watched our episode on the movie Avatar, on the first one, pantheism still a central aspect of Pandora. And if you want to know more about that, you can listen to that episode. I don't want to go into all of that again. It might come up as we talk, but we go kind of into detail about pantheism and that foundation in the first one. But so that's one of the first things I notice. It's still kind of that type of world. That's still the underlying worldview in terms of the spirituality of the film. But beyond that, so setting that aside, um, when the movie was over, I can say that I really enjoyed it. When it was over, I really enjoyed it, and I can get into more detail about that in a second. But what were your thoughts?
So I'm actually kind of torn, and we can get into it a little bit more later with why I'm torn. I'm going to choose to be positive about it instead of the alternative viewpoint that we'll get into.
Okay.
I actually think that depending upon how you look at it, there's a giant plot hole in the movie. But if you're positive
Okay.
about the plot hole, you can actually write it off as part of the plot, and it actually makes sense with the theme of the role of a father within the movie.
Okay.
So we'll see where the conversation goes and if it's worth talking about that. But your view, based off of your Facebook post on WatchWell, that was Nick, guys, that posted that. The nuclear family to you seemed pretty central to the or speaking to the nuclear family seems pretty central to the plot.
Yeah, and it definitely is, and I've got some stuff to talk about with that. So the reason behind that post was more so, if you look, the picture that went along with that post, I think I shared the picture too. It was a Twitter post, and then I shared it to Facebook. I shared a screenshot to it. I was responding to the fact that the movie, the audiences gave this an A cinema score, which, if you don't know about cinema score is like a poll of people who are leaving the film. So they just watched it and it's getting their immediate feedback on the film. And people that were coming out of the film immediately gave it a score of an A. So the cinema score for this film was an A, and they put it up. And so if you look at this movie, um, it's obvious that the family is central to it. And the family that is central is the Sullys, Jake Sully. I always forget the girl's name every time, even in the first movie. But so the Sully family is central to the movie. And so the reason I posted that is, why are people rating this movie an A at a time when we're actually seeing pretty popular movements to get rid of the nuclear family. What is it about this movie that, with family at the center of it as it is, yet people are giving it an A? And this is a mass amount of people. And so my thought behind that is there must be something deep within us that knows the value of family, and specifically the nuclear family and that structure. There must be something deep within us that is acknowledging that when we watch a story and respond emotionally in a positive way to it. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. I mean, you're
Yeah.
touching on. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. You're touching on the conflicting worldviews and beliefs that, you know, really what you're saying is it's innate. We can't get away from
Yeah.
it.
Because really, this is a movie Hollywood should hate. Hollywood should hate this movie.
Right. It doesn't make it's just a little nonsensical with what they perpetuate today and then what they're producing. Almost manipulative and
Yeah.
hypocritical.
Yep.
If
So if
not
yeah,
that
yeah,
as a standard.
yeah, and if you were to look at the political aspect of things, the political viewpoints of those, even the people who made this film, right?
Well, I
I
mean,
think
so
James
much so that recently it's catching controversy about cultural appropriation. So
Fair enough.
so like it's even like having I mean I just
The
read the
first one
title.
did too.
Yeah, but just having it's just always about race. It's just ridiculous. Not
Yeah.
even really worth unpacking that because of how nonsensical that is. But
Right.
uh, you're right. There is a lot of hypocrisy in the media, and
Yeah.
with the elites that just doesn't make sense.
Yep.
It would be nice to just go to a movie and enjoy it,
Mhm. Yeah.
for
Which
face
I think you
value.
can do. You can do in this movie because, at least in my opinion, and other people might differ, I didn't really see any overt, like, political statements in this movie whatsoever.
Well, see, I did, but what we would say is a good political statement, which is
Okay,
why
yeah,
it
fair
doesn't
enough.
make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Like I totally forgot that Avatar is a Disney thing, which is kind
Well,
of
it's
crazy,
because they bought it after the fact.
right?
Yeah.
But at the time of making and uh this second movie, the release of the second movie, it's a Disney thing, and
Right.
I was pleasantly surprised with the role of the father being talked about in such a positive light, and the nuclear family and all of that. There's a lot of conservative and biblical concepts in this movie.
Mhm.
So, and we can start unpacking that now. But what would you say, just coming right out of the gate for the nuclear family? What was the big kind of I mean, was there a quote for you? Was there a concept that you wanted to get started talking about?
Yeah, there's quite a bit, but the quote that really sticks out in my mind is when Jake, who's the
Yep.
main male character, um, says something like "Sollies stick together," and he's talking about his family unit and how they are to stay together and rally around each other. And all throughout the movie, the their family is portrayed as a single unit. It's not a collection of individuals. There are moments where they go their own way and do their own thing, but when it all comes down to it, they are one unit together.
Yeah, they are Sully.
They are Sollies, and
Mm-hmm.
Sollies stick together, and the movie kind of comes back to that over and over again. Not the quote, but it portrays that over and over again. And so that kind of gets the thought going in my head. Why is the nuclear family, or you could even just say family. Let's just even just, I mean, we can call it nuclear family, but let's just say family. Why is family and the unity of family so valuable and important? So that's the thought that keeps coming to my mind over and over again. And I also think that this movie does a great job of answering that question. And I'll just give one example from the movie itself. This is a spoiler. If you haven't seen it, I know this is new. Um, this is a pretty big spoiler that I'm getting ready to share. So
Yeah,
if you
so
don't
if you
want to
don't know,
know,
if you don't want to know, click off. You know already if you have been watching our episodes and our podcast. If you are familiar with it, you know that we talk about all of the movie, the whole movie. We don't really want to hear any complaining. Go watch the movie and come back. We're giving you time to pause it now. But if you don't care, keep watching. But yeah, go ahead. There's your
yeah,
spoiler alert.
there's the spoiler. I just want to be clear because a lot of times we're reviewing older movies, so it's
Right.
you know
Not as big of a
spoilers.
deal, but this one was
Not really
what
worried about spoilers. Yeah,
released
this one's a
2 week?
week old.
Yeah, a week old.
A week old. So yeah. So one last time, spoiler. Do not get mad if you stay and listen to this part of what I'm about to say. So this is one example that I can think of why family is so important. And it has to do with the grief that they all must go through when the oldest son dies, right? So Sully's oldest son, when there's this massive fight and battle going on, which is really cool. I love all the action scenes. They're really good. Um, but the oldest son dies, and the family, some of them are kidnapped and trapped and all of that stuff. But how is it that a family is able, or that people are more equipped to overcome the grief they experience when they experience some type of trauma in their life? Something awful has just happened. If I'm And I think we can see this in the Bible in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 when God tells us that it's not good that man should be alone, right? That's the establishment of the family. And why? Because when we're in isolation, grief will overtake us. When we're in isolation, the negative things that we experience in life, whether it be, by our own doing, or, somebody's it has done something against us, but the unity and cohesion and support of our family will help us to overcome, and we overcome together. So
Mhm.
that's where I got from this whole point of Sully's stick together. Even in that moment where one of us, who is a Sully, one of us, it has been killed, we stick together and we overcome together. Like that picture of how we get past things. And you could apply that very point to a lot of the issues and problems that we see today. And in 2020, we had um, the Black Lives Matter movement kind of rose to prominence again. They in early 2010s they were really prominent, and then came back to prominence again in 2020 with the George Floyd situation and everything that followed after that. And I think it's fairly well known that one of their Black Lives Matter, one of their main agenda points was to abolish the nuclear family,
Yep.
because with their worldview, you attribute the suffering and trauma that has happened to people in the world to the nuclear family. So the nuclear family existing isn't something that was established. So this is the other worldview. The nuclear family that has been established over time isn't something that has been instituted and established by God, our creator. It's something that has arisen over time and is actually the result of imperialism, colonialism, and wars and all of these things. Therefore, it's not objectively good, and it has to be done away with, right? So that's the worldview. But what we do when we strip people of the bonds that they have to their nuclear family, what ends up happening, unless you replace that somehow, and I don't know how you do, they lose their ability to persevere through struggle. They lose their ability to persevere through things that are awful, and to get past the grief they experience, because there's no one there supporting them in the same way that a family can. There's a unique ability that a family who has come together has. It's a unique situation that prepares us to overcome challenges in a way that we can't otherwise. And the reason we experience family that way is because it is actually God's idea. It is actually Him who designed and instituted the family. He does it in creation in the book of Genesis. We see how that plays out. He gives Adam and Eve the command to be fruitful and multiply. It's their job to subdue and fill the earth and to raise their children to do the same. And there's mission and purpose and value, and you rally around and unity, and you rally around each other to build each other up. And I feel like that's the picture of family that this movie actually presents. I know I've said a lot there, and I went in a
Yeah,
lot of different ways,
there's a
but
lot to
um,
unpack there. Um, so with the alternative worldview, because you mentioned that,
mhm.
if you so family is the smallest form of government. Would you agree with that? Like if you
Um,
if you took away everything, family within itself would be a form of government.
sure, yeah,
Would
there
you agree
definitely,
with that? So
yeah,
I guess the worldview with imperialism and everything that you kind of touched on there, is there a place for that worldview, the motives of that worldview to continually push the idolization of world government by destroying the nuclear family? What else? Because you asked the question, what else do you have?
mhm,
So if you destroy the nuclear family, your family and your parental authority or your God, the God authority of that worldview would be either society or the government.
yeah,
So
government is our dad,
the government would be your dad, right?
yeah,
So
and that's why we go to him for an allowance.
right, exactly. So with that, I don't know how else you would view that. But in Genesis 2, the family starts with leaving and cleaving, right? The
Mhm,
man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife.
sure,
So that's where it starts.
yeah,
And the reason why it starts there is because man and wife become one flesh. They become
yeah,
so Sully, and is her name Natiri?
Natiri, yeah,
Is it
that's it,
Natiri?
yeah,
So Jake and Natiri become one flesh. Now, obviously, we
they're
got into
aliens,
pantheism and they're aliens and
yeah,
whatever, um,
well, one's half alien.
but the biblical worldview of their relationship, which kind of gets into, is a good segue into what I took away from the movie, is the role. So you talked about the nuclear family as like a broad thing, and we can go further into what you got out of that more, but bringing what I got out of the movie into the conversation is how important the role of mother and father is within that nuclear family,
Mhm,
specifically the husband's role.
yeah.
But we'll put a pin in that for a little bit later. Um,
Well, I think that fits really well. There's study after study that shows that children have far less, um, uh, far less issues, and that's not the right word that I'm looking for, but it's the one I can think of at the moment. So,
well, their success
um,
rates are greatly diminished.
right, when yeah, there when
Opportunity and
success rates, opportunities are far less likely to come when you don't have a father in the home,
right.
right? So like
So like right now
behavior
we see it
issues,
in
mental health
right.
issues,
Well, right
all of
now we
those
see it in
are
society, right? We talk about privilege,
yeah.
and right now, like white privilege or male privilege or whatever the privilege is, this month. Uh, you don't necessarily, through society and the biblical worldview, you don't get privilege based off of your race or your gender, but there is a privilege by having both parents.
Mhm.
There is a privilege by having both a mom and a dad, and then there's greater privilege, greater blessing when you have both parents united as one flesh, as one unit, that
Mhm.
are willing to raise their kids up in the way of the Lord.
Yeah.
So that's what everything is pointing to. So in the movie's sake, with Jake and Natiri, would you say that they're united throughout
Yes.
the journey?
Well, they have disagreement, but disagreement is not the absence of unity.
Correct.
So yes, I would say they're united.
So what character stands out to you more, Jake or Natiri?
In what way?
Christian marriage. So you said disagreement. Let's pull on that thread a little bit.
Okay.
Because what I saw was a very vocal yet submissive to the authority of her husband wife.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah,
beautifully portrayed.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah,
and I saw a husband who was absolutely trying to do the right thing by everyone, but couldn't because he was afraid.
Yeah,
that's what
I
I
can
saw.
see that.
And I think that is relatable to every father, every good-hearted Christian father in the world.
Yeah, and ultimately,
I can't succeed because of my fear. So the question is, how do we overcome that as men?
Mm-hmm.
Because his biggest flaw was not listening to his wife at the very beginning. Because if you noticed, at the very beginning of the movie was, I need to leave my place. I need to leave my home. I need to leave my home to protect the people that I have been entrusted with and put my family first, to only go to the very end of the movie and say, this is our new home and this is where I make my last stand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, this plot hole, right? If he would have listened to his wife at the beginning and said, this is my people, this is my home, this is where I make my last stand, we wouldn't have needed the other 2 hours of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little contradictory in that aspect, but you throw in the absolutely real existence of fear and how it manipulates and steals our ability to make decisions based off of our biblical knowledge or our biblical counsel and what everything else is pointing to. Because of our fear, we as men, it makes it very difficult for us as men to make the right decisions regardless of how loving and submissive our wives are. Now, it's not a justification by any means. It's a self-reflective point to say, how can we be logical when we want to be emotional as men?
Mm-hmm.
Because in my opinion, they should have stayed in their home at Home Tree or with their people, because family is bigger than blood, right? Family is more than just who are, is kind of back to the old adage of it takes a village, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the environment that in which they live as a tribal community. So there's a lot there. I don't know if you have anything that you want to unpack, but that's kind of the beginning of what I got out of the overarching theme of the movie.
Yeah, I'll go back to what you were saying about the picture of a vocal but submissive wife who defers to her husband's judgment, even at times when she disagrees, because she trusts him. And you can see that in the example you gave when they leave their people. They it's hard to call them people because they are aliens from another planet, and
Right.
they're large and blue with tails and
Right.
and stuff. But
And hair,
so
a braid that connects to
yeah,
everything.
yeah. When they leave their tribe, let's say that
tribe.
maybe, because she doesn't think that's a good idea at the moment. And yeah, even if you were to go the route to say that he's kind of making his decision based on fear, even though he is, and I can agree with that. At the same time, he's still trying to make the decision that he thinks keeps his family and his tribe safe. Right? That's his goal, even in
Right.
that moment, because he believes that if he stays there, then it's inevitable that even if they keep fighting off the sky people, right? Even if they keep fighting them off, they're just going to come back, come back, come back. And he knows in his mind that they want him. So the logic of his decision making there is, okay, everyone is at risk if I'm here. So I need to leave.
And increase the risk of a different tribe.
Right. But that's kind of where it's kind of foolishness, because they're going to find you, right?
They are
And
going to, because
and
you know
as
the
you're
enemy.
watching the movie, you know that that's inevitably what's going to happen too. So you're like, "Ooh, do
Right.
they really have to go through all of this just to get to the battles and all of that stuff?" And so that's what I would say. That's why I said once the movie was over, I can say I enjoyed it. But the first half of the movie, I was bored out of my mind.
Right.
I,
Right.
I was
Right.
really
Right.
bored. But once they got past all of that, it was good.
Yeah, it was like an
Um,
hour and a half in. I'm like, we haven't even gotten to the way of the water yet.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we haven't even gotten to water yet.
Yeah.
This is just the first
So
Avatar.
yeah.
We're still in the
And
forest. We're still forest people.
yeah.
Um,
But she, even though she disagrees and she's vocal about her disagreement, what does she do? She goes.
yep.
She follows him. And she goes to the people, and she's even in disagreement that the people that he goes to will even accept them, right?
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't even think that that's possible, yet she follows them right onto their beach, right?
Yep.
Because she believes in him. She trusts him. She, at the very least, even though she disagrees, she knows with 100% confidence that he, in his mind, is doing the very best he can for their family. And because of that, she's going to trust and follow,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
It's
She's
very.
not gonna
It's the
usurp it.
Bible uses the word reverence. I believe. I
Yeah.
believe it's reverence. And I think that if I'm remembering correctly, off the top of my head, it's talking about love him regardless of whether he's a believer or not by through your actions as a Christian wife, he will be saved.
Mhm.
So he'll be saved through your belief.
Yeah.
Which is I mean, I don't know if I can think of a movie better that displays that than this movie.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that really stuck out to me. Now, on the flip side of that, as men, we need to know when to let our wives speak into our lives, because of the role that they've been given by God. Their ordained role
Mhm.
is to be our helper. And we need to know when to discern, like when to let them do that. Uh, and that's just part of being a good godly man.
So what I would say to that aspect is a godly man should always be open to correction regardless of when it comes.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Bible says a
So,
fool hates correction. Yep.
yep. So you should your starting point, especially with your spouse, with your wife, should be if she's giving me some type of criticism, she's doing it because she loves me.
Right, and we need to yeah. So, and that's another good point too. Is you have to start a Christian marriage has to start with no matter what, I will always give them the benefit of the doubt until
Mhm.
they tell me, like until I see otherwise.
Mhm.
It needs to start with that. This is a good thing. This is them acting out of love, and then when you see evidence of something else, then we
Yeah.
can handle it accordingly.
And in the movie, Jake always hears out Natiri's concerns and disagreement. He doesn't always follow in terms of I don't think there's one time actually that he follows what she wanted to do.
Right, which
But
is why
every
we had a
single time,
3-hour movie.
right. But every single time he at the very least hears her. And every single time she goes with him.
Yeah,
And so what that does is to take it back to the picture of family, that presents a united family to the kids.
it does absolutely.
That gives freedom to the kids to follow
Mm-hmm.
and to do what, and it creates a safe space for their kids. Um, so you have this when mom and dad are unified, and again, I want to really hammer that disagreement does not mean disunity.
Absolutely.
Disagreement is natural and discussion should happen and argument can happen and debate can happen. That doesn't mean you're not united.
But
W-
for husband and wife, there's a time and place, and it
For
needs
sure.
and that argument and discussion and ironing out the details of all of that needs to happen in a separate place away from the kids,
Yeah.
so that to the world and to your children, all they see is unity,
Yeah.
because that's
And
vital.
that provides, and this might be jumping ahead a little bit. So I might need to go backwards. I'm not sure, but the other thing that the movie portrays well is that provides a safe place for your kids to fail
Mm-hmm.
and make mistakes. So, for example, because you have this united family, when the middle son continually does things that makes their new tribe mad, who is it that steps in and says, "I'll handle this"?
Father.
Father, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if the father doesn't step in and handle it and just leaves it to the tribe, what would happen?
I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen.
It probably leads to the traumatization of that child, right? It probably
Well,
leads to issues where that child, it, it wasn't a safe way to fail because the consequences and discipline that's going to come are harsher and more severe, meaning in long-term impact
well, you see that. You
than
see that in the whale. What were those creatures? It's exile.
Mhm.
You see that
Yeah.
in the whole arc of the middle child being an outsider.
Yep.
His perception is that he's an outsider. What he doesn't know, and part of this gets into the role of a father, which we can get into a little bit later as well. But you know, his perception is that that's not there because dad doesn't sign off on. He doesn't have a good connection with dad.
Mhm.
A good personal connection with dad. So he believes he's an outsider while dad is also defending him.
Mhm.
So
Protecting him.
his perception is a little off
Yep.
with the variable of fathers need to do both, connect while defending them even though your kids may not see it. You've got to communicate enough of that love and the other side of
Yeah.
that.
Because no matter how much he fails, he's still in the family.
Yes.
But
But that wasn't
if
communicated.
if we're if we're talking about the tribe, there is a failure that can mean you're not in the tribe anymore.
Correct.
So
Well, let's pull on that one a little bit. Is there a form of exile to family from a
I
Christian
don't
perspective? What's your thoughts
I
on that?
don't think that there's truly any exile in family that somebody cannot. That's a I don't know. What I was about to say is probably not the best way to communicate my thoughts. So I'm stopping I'm stopping in the middle of that statement.
Well, do you
But
want to take a break real quick and think about it?
sure, yeah, let's take a break.
Let's take a break and we'll come right back, okay? Okay, guys, we need to take some time out and talk about where to find us. We are on all social media platforms. That means Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as the main ones. We do have a Parler account as well. Go like and follow our pages. Join the discussion on social media. We want you guys to be involved in the discourse, and we want to sharpen iron as iron sharpens iron. Create discussion around viewing stories through the lens of truth. If you like audio only, we are on Buzzsprout. We are also anywhere else that you like to consume podcast content. That means Google Podcast, that means Apple Podcast, and Spotify as the main ones. We're pretty much everywhere. So don't be afraid to use your own podcast platform, the one that you like the most, and find us there. We are also on YouTube for those that want to watch the video podcast. Go like and subscribe, click the notification bell, leave a comment. All of that helps with the algorithms and pushes us to more people. We want to reach people with the gospel. We want to teach and educate those to view stories through the lens of truth. If you wouldn't mind, take a second to go to your favorite audio podcast platform and leave us a review. You can leave us a 5-star review only if you like the content. If you don't like the content, you probably aren't going to leave us a review, or you'll leave us a bad one, and that's fine too. So go leave us a review. That also helps with the algorithm and gets us to more people. Thanks, guys. Back to the episode. Okay, Nick, so we were talking about the nuclear family before we took the break. You were organizing your thoughts.
Yeah. So I guess the way I want to say it is, I think there are exceptions to what I'm about to say. But if you're so going back to that quote, "Sollies stick together,"
Mm-hmm.
right? If you've created that type of family environment, the types of actions that could lead to the necessity of completely separating from your nuclear family won't happen. Does that make sense?
Say that one more time for the people in the back.
If you've created, as a father, as a leader, as a husband and wife, mother, father, if you've created the type of environment that truly exudes, we stick together, we are one, and that is the baseline, that is the foundation, the types of things that would necessitate completely separating from one another will not happen.
I don't know if I agree,
Okay.
because the variable in that is the child's choice to follow it or not. So you can create the best Christian environment for Christian living, for a Christian household, for a Christian nuclear family. Mom and dad can be unified. But as the kids grow and mature, they still have their own choice. But I think to your point, what I do agree with is that sets mom and dad up to meet the child where they are and with what they need to learn. So parenting a kid doesn't stop ever.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I brought this up, because my first thought was edification. At what point do parents say, okay, you no longer live in this house because this house follows God? That doesn't always equate to exile. That just means for this season of time, maybe this is the punishment, this is whatever. Give them over to their whatever, their hardened heart, or whatever Bible verse language that makes sense in that example. The depravity within their decision making, so that parents aren't enabling bad behavior. And obviously, in this scenario, you're talking to an older kid, you're talking to someone older or whatever. I believe that what you're stating for younger kids holds true. I would agree with that.
Right.
But I think there's a journey with that.
Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6.
I think we would have to unpack that, because I believe that there are Christians out here who have believed that they've done a good job in training their kids, but there's still the variable in the practical scenario and examples of Christian households that train their kids in the way of the Lord, but then their kids grow up and they aren't Christians.
Sure. Yeah. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that when you've created the environment, I'm not even talking about faith, all right? I'm not
Right.
even talking about sharing the faith or
Right.
becoming Christian. I'm saying you've laid a foundation of the type of values that you exude.
Mm-hmm.
That child will have that foundation. And people always live from their foundation. So a family, so for example, and we see this play out in life, and so when I say that those things won't happen, I know it sounds like I'm saying 100% of the time without exception, but that's also not what I'm saying. There are always exceptions. There are always things that happen. There are always variables. But what I'm trying to set forth is to communicate a principle and a value that, for example, if if there's a man and woman,
Mm-hmm.
they they choose to have a family and do the things necessary to have a family, but they're not married, they're not committed to each other. They just do it, and then the lady gives birth to a son. All
Okay.
right? And there's no connection whatsoever between man and woman.
Mm-hmm.
The parents, mom and dad. And dad decides, I don't love this woman. I don't want anything to do with this woman. I'm just gonna leave.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That does more to the child than just simply the questions of whether or not my dad loves me or not.
Oh,
There's more
absolutely agree with that.
damage. There's more
Yeah.
damage. So what I'm saying is, and that child, just for the simple fact that there was no unity between mom and dad, because you could say the same thing about a couple who does nothing but fight and argue, or an abusive father, or a verbally abusive mother, or things like that. You could say the same thing about any level of disunity. That child is likely to grow up and have no idea how to deal with challenges that come their way. They're going to be resilient and they're going to do the best they can, but they will never feel supported. They will never feel loved in the way that they should. And the fruit of that
Mm-hmm.
is, and we see this play out in the world. The
Right.
fruit of that is crime, things that take place, events that the child will then grow to do that do necessitate division in family. And um, it's not because all of a sudden they just chose that they had no support. It's because from the very beginning of their life, they have no idea what it means to be a part of one cohesive unit and experience the love and support that comes from that. So they just go off and do their own thing. They don't know what it means to say, you know what, I don't want this. I'm gonna follow this, even
Well,
though I disagree.
well, there's no rooting in what to follow, because if dad is not consistent, or whatever father figure, um, then there's a greater wedge between earthly dad and heavenly dad.
Yeah,
There's a bigger gap to fill.
yeah.
Now,
So I guess
Christ is sufficient to fill it, but
I guess yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is that when there's that unity present, when mom and dad s- are are presenting that picture of a united duo, and there's this the underlying assumption to everything is that we are together, not just mom and dad, but to the whole family. We are one together. Whatever we go through together. Whatever we have to fight, we fight together. Whatever challenge comes our way, we overcome it together. When you are constantly assured and reassured and confident that everything you go through in life, you're going to go through with your family, that gives you that gives you the strength, the endurance, the ability to persevere things, the ability to overcome challenges, to the point that the decisions that people make to perpetuate the type of crimes and things would that would result in family division, those things just generally don't happen in families like that. Doesn't mean they never will or can't, or just
right.
in 100% of the circumstances. It's just saying when you have that foundation is meaningful and impactful, and it's far less likely that any of those types of things are going to happen. So I guess the question um, was about, is there times when families should just kind of, break apart, or,
Well, no, I'm
exile
not. I'm not
kind of
saying.
thing?
I
And
wasn't. I wasn't saying that. My question was more how, like, is to understand that not so exile is different than I'm not going to, as a parent, you need to learn the hard way, and I'm not going to edify or take part in you continually either showing this type of sin or this lack of maturity or whatever. So,
oh
getting
yeah,
kicked out of the house, there's a difference there. Was kind of the
but
whole point of
like
that thread,
correction and
correction or whatever. If
right.
if you're making bad financial decisions and mom and dad are supporting you, and they kick you out of the house and say we're going to cut you off, that's not you getting kicked out of the family. That's them being a parent.
And I would say
And
that
parents need to be, encouraged to go there if needed, because it's about what's best for the kid, and God does that with us. He gives us over to the depraved nature of our heart when we need to, so that we hit a rock bottom, so that the only thing we have to turn to is Christ.
yeah. So I guess so going off of what you said, what I was trying to communicate is that's those things are very unlikely to happen if you've created the type of environment that
Right.
we see in this movie.
So then, how would you diagnose that as a parent who believes or has the perception that they have created that, and they don't have the fruit of which you're speaking of? Because that would be the next question. I feel like I had a unified marriage with my wife, and we built an environment in which our kids went to Christian schools. They went to church every Sunday morning, and yet my kids don't believe in Jesus. What do I do then?
Continue. Persevere.
Right. I would say control what you can control.
Yeah.
Continue being a light for your kids, and find what's the word? Find hope and peace that you did the best you could with the spiritual maturity you had at the time.
So here's the thing too is I would say the atheist family who presents this type of environment, their children are still more likely to be successful, well-adjusted, not do the types of things um, that lead to crime and things like that. Even if it's not even because
Even if their
the
worldview's in vain, is your point. Yeah.
even if their worldview is in vain,
Right.
because God designed the family, and anytime anyone on earth, no matter their belief system, operates closely to God's design, good things happen. So even in a marriage that isn't actually where they wouldn't say their
Yeah.
marriage is built on the foundation of Christ, and that's what brings them unity. Even in that situation, will it be as beneficial? Probably not. But even in that situation, the kids are going to be better off than they would have been if they didn't have that cohesive family at all.
Right. And just for clarity, you're not saying better off as in more successful, financially or prosperity types of stuff. You're saying more equipped to handle the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
More equipped to handle the world, more equipped to overcome challenge, have a higher ability to problem solve and think through issues
And have
because
a
they've been
yeah.
helped and
They have a
yeah,
better foundation and baseline to
right.
be rooted in truth so that when things come their way, they know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I would agree with that.
in a perfect situation, yes, having that foundation and that all of that be built upon Christ is the absolute best case scenario. But I think because God designed the world in a certain way, God designed the family, even even those who don't believe at all have the ability to present this type of family environment and to
Right.
create the type of family environment that is present in and I think we saw that all through, like, the 40s and 50s in a lot of ways, like
Well, they have the ability to tap into the good fruit that. Yeah, I think it's important to note that. So they have the ability to tap into the good fruit that it bears by creating that environment, but
right.
it's all in
They're
vain.
still missing something huge, and they're
Yeah,
missing
it's
the
all in
key
vain.
component, but
Right. I would think um but this brings us back to the role of the father, which I think is what the movie's about. So I
Mhm.
watching the movie, I didn't take away, like, I took away the nuclear family, but I don't think that it was the big moral of the story, so to speak. I thought having a man who has been by God's authority been given a family, knowing when to fight for that family and when to make a stand by using the counsel of yourself, what you know, where you feel led, the biblical authority in which you have to lead your family, counsel of your wife, and what's best for the kids, all has to culminate into a decision that's very, very hard to make when you yourself are human and have to deal with fear and battle those negative human characteristics. So all of that, creating that authority, creating that environment starts with a man who is submissive to God. That's where it starts. And you know, when you're submissive to God and you're humbled before God, it puts you in a better perspective to listen to the godly counsel of your wife and other people in your life in order to make those decisions, because he's the chief. You know, in the movie, let's take Jake for example. In the movie, he's the chief of the Navi tribe, right? The forest people. Who did he seek counsel from?
His wife.
That's it, right? So where are the other men in his life to help him make a well-rounded decision? What if the roles was reversed and he was going to fight, but his wife was scared or whatever, and she was like, "No, we just need to flee to the mountains or the sea and disappear." I think that also is a testament of having a good, close-knit group of God-fearing people as a man in your circle to help make wise decisions. That was lacking. It was this is on Jake's plate and only Jake's plate, and his wife was giving him her thoughts is kind of what it boiled down to. And I don't think that that's a good depiction of what a godly man does.
Okay. So seeking counsel outside of...
Seeking good, well-rounded counsel from God-fearing people that have proven their relationship with Christ to you, not just anybody that says that. In addition to your wife, because you are one flesh with her, it all fits. It's all in there so that you can make a good decision and a well-rounded. Because we all have our bias, and we all have like fear and different emotions that we have to handle. And that can cloud our judgment.
Yeah.
And ultimately Scripture, obviously. So that's huge. So I guess I would ask you, do you think that he should have stayed in the forest and fought, or do you think that they should have fled to the sea? Which do you think would have been the better decision?
Well, I really liked the water scenes. So. the water battles and stuff. So I'm kind of glad he fled. I don't know.
When should a man fight for his family and his home? Should I go to should I flee my house and go to my neighbor's house to fight for my family and my home, or should I stay at home and do it?
Well, what did the early church do?
You tell me, Nick.
They fled.
They did flee.
And it was right. It was good. It was ordained by God for them to flee. So it's...
But in America, we have stand your ground laws.
But so like what
so
if,
how does that fit?
So let's play that out. What if they did?
What if they
shoot Paul?
Yeah, right.
Shoot Saul, and then no, we have no New Testament. Yeah. So
that's really funny,
right? I mean,
right.
So
is it wrong of me to defend my family and when a thief breaks in at night, or should I go to my neighbor's house and do it? How do we
comes down to the individual moment, and we do have to kind of recognize that the type of culture we live in now is very different from the type of culture that the Bible was written in. And if you want to use the movie, the type of culture we live in is very different than the type of culture the Navi live in and have created. So like there, when it's your tribe, I mean, they've already endured the home tree coming down, right? They've already endured all of that previously. And if Jake truly believes that his presence will bring harm to everyone else, and he truly believes that no one will find him if he goes elsewhere, that's probably the right call.
I would agree with that. Yeah. And the first movie is definitely different than the second movie, because the first movie was about resources.
Yeah.
The second movie is literally a hit.
Yeah.
Like, he's got a price on his head.
Yeah. And there is, there are those people looking for that other resources that comes from the
brain
they
of
say
the
yeah, I can't remember what they
whale.
call it. It's not unobtainium,
No, it's
but
not.
it was an equally kind of cringy name.
Yeah.
But
There's like
they say it stops,
age regeneration or something. Yeah.
yeah, Regeneron.
Yeah,
Is that
Regeneron.
what it
It's
was?
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they say it stops aging, stops human aging.
So
So there's a bit of that,
I
but
think what you're saying is true. I think that's why it's so important to have a theological foundation for the defense of life, because the reason why defense of life is good is because God, we're made in the image of God. So life is inherently worth defending.
yeah.
It's why the Second Amendment made it into the Constitution here in America. If there is a way to not take another life, regardless of the threat, the level of threat rather, is because that person is still in the image of God, and from our Christian worldview, eliminating that person's life is still sad, regardless of them being a threat and threatening someone else's life, because their life is inherently valuable as well.
Yeah.
So that's why having a theological framework for defense with a firearm or any type of defense is vital.
Yeah.
So I asked the questions just to get the conversation rolling, but
Yeah.
that's why, because if someone breaks into my house at night and I defend my family with a firearm, ultimately I am removing that person's ability to confess, repent, and follow Jesus. In a way.
Yeah.
And there's value there.
Yeah. So, but also, some of the key factors there are, in that situation, you have to make a split second type of decision,
You do.
right? You're faced with something that's immediately happening right in front of you, and you have to make a decision based on how you assess
The threat.
and everything like that.
Right.
But in the movie,
There's
he
time.
knows they're coming. There's time. He has time to create a plan, to figure out what is the best course of action. It's also kind of like Home Alone. Home Alone, Kevin McAllister takes the exact opposite approach, right?
He waits
He
for
knows
him.
he knows that the threat is coming, and then he sets up all these traps for when they get there, and
But that goes back to the point of, is your home worth defending?
but it also comes to what is a home. And I think the point of Avatar is wherever your family is, that's your home.
Yeah, so then how do we extrapolate that? And maybe I'm thinking too deeply on this, but I think the principles still apply. How do we extrapolate that with military defense?
Mm-hmm.
Do we just pick up and move America?
Well,
If someone
no,
wants
you
to
can't do that.
You know what I mean? So why would defending land be okay or not okay?
Well, it all comes down to
Why you're
that
defending
situation.
it? Yeah,
why you're defending it? What
Yeah.
is the situation going on? What is the threat? What is going to happen if we lose this? What is the danger that comes of it? There's just so many factors.
What are the beliefs and worldview of the aggressor?
Right. Yeah. There's so many factors that play into that, that have to come into play, and that's why there's so many people involved in making those kind of decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Maybe
it's not
too many.
just yeah. But if someone comes up to me and tries to attack me with something, in that moment, it's okay to just protect myself, right?
Right.
But if someone comes up to me and says, you're going to be standing right there at 8 p.m. tonight, and it's like 10 a.m., and when you get to that spot at 8 p.m. at night, I'm going to stab you with a knife. Well, okay, I'll move over to that spot instead.
Well, I think it's different when it's your home, because you have a right to your home.
Be.
So if someone says, I'm going to come to your house tonight and shoot your family up,
then you would call the police.
I would call the police and let the police know that,
yeah.
Hey, there's a crime.
There's
a crime that's about to be committed. But I would also have, a few ARs and pistols ready to go, some body armor.
But it
doesn't mean that I'm going to leave my house. I think that's a good point. There wouldn't be any harm.
Right.
There wouldn't be any harm. I would have the police here and whatever.
Right.
But I
Like,
also don't
okay,
think
well,
it's. But I also
we'll
don't
go to
think it's.
grandma's house.
Yeah, I also don't think that it would be wrong to stay at your house.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the predicament. I guess that's the whole dynamic of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it just ultimately comes down to Jake's motives were that everyone was better off if they left.
Right. I still think that he should have stayed there and fought him.
But then you just get a repeat of Avatar 1
Right. Without the unobtainium.
without the unobtainium and without
Which may be a better
the
movie.
without the big ships. Yeah.
Maybe a better movie. But
Yeah.
no, it goes back to the role of a father and the dynamic of the nuclear family hinging on the role of father and mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also we see transitioning to or from the nuclear family, family is more than just blood.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And we see that in the movie played out really well too, because there are adopted kids in the movie and they struggle with identity. And it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you were talking about previously.
Yep.
We have one child that was born from an avatar, has
Virgin
no idea
birth.
has no idea who her father is, and that was part of the character arc is who's my dad, and then the dream
Right.
disappeared. And we've got another kid who doesn't know who his dad is and comes to find out that he's the main villain, is his father,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just abandoned.
Yeah.
And he was just kind of adopted by the tribe. So there's a lot of identity happening, like a misplaced identity or unknown identity happening because they don't know who their parents are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that fits perfectly into your point earlier about creating that environment as one flesh, husband and wife, so that your kids are protected and have room to know who they are and fail safely.
Yeah. So we were foster parents for several years, you know this, but and that's one of the biggest challenges of being a foster parent is, and this isn't the case for everyone, but I just speak from our experience, is that when mistakes would happen, there would just be this like, and you have to address a mistake and try to correct something. There would be this feeling in our foster kids about my whole world is over now. I made this mistake and now I'm going to be abandoned. No one's going to love me. No one's going to care for me. And I have to, and
Earn
it's
it.
just like everything is crashing down. And
Yeah,
it could
and
be something as simple like just
yeah.
one small mistake. And that was the challenge, was try to, okay, no, yes, I'm correcting you. You did something wrong. We need to correct this, and this shouldn't happen. You shouldn't behave this way. But no, you're secure. You're safe here. You're okay here.
And the only thing that can
You can
prove
have
that is
confidence
time.
here.
Yeah. The only thing that can prove that is time.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again, no matter what someone does. And I think that that's a really good. I mean, how often do we do that with God?
Yeah.
We do that all the time. Like, oh, my
Panic
life is
and think.
over. Like, just panic,
Yeah.
and I'm,
Over.
and then we get into this loop of I have to earn it back.
Mhm.
I have to earn my salvation back because I did things. That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
It's through grace alone, through faith alone, and that's sometimes hard for us as people who are achieving. We put our self-worth in what we achieve so often that we forget that that's not how God works.
Yeah. And one of the other things is, um, the the kids we were foster parents to, I mean, there were a lot of challenges, but for the most part, until the end, there weren't really any behavior issues, or a lot of them. And they they were put into foster care, and they
Mm-hmm.
went to a family member, and then they went to another family, and then they went to another family, and then they came to us. And I was in the car once, and one of the girls was just talking. She was 5 years old and said, "So, when are you gonna give us up and we're gonna go to another family?" And that had become her norm, was there is no stability in family. I'm not with my mom and dad. and then I was with this family for a little bit, and then I was with this family for a little bit, and then I was with this family for a little bit, and now I'm here with you. So in her world, family didn't mean stability. Family didn't mean um, confidence or
Mm-hmm.
safe space. Family was something that you just always lose.
Right. That's powerful.
And so that was part of the challenge. Is she was like, when are we going to the next family? And what I tried to communicate, and I don't know if it ever came across, was no. You know what? You might go back to your regular family at some point, but you're going to be with us. You're either going to go back to your regular family or you're going to stay with us. You'll be with your family or you'll be with us. And that is the only thing that's going to happen. And so trying to build that confidence in their environment to say, this is stable. I can mess up and still have love. I can succeed. I can go through all these things. I can feel a part of something. I can be with people, and it's not going to be the end of the world. This is a family, and we're stable, and we're together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
that's so
trying
good,
to
man.
build that environment with them. And sometimes it was really difficult, and it didn't work at all. But it's the intent and the effort, and constantly being intentional about doing that.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. So, Avatar: The Way of the Water.
Mm-hmm.
Was it good or bad?
I'll rate it a 7 out of 10. And
Um,
here's what it is. Here's what I'll say.
Go ahead.
The first half is like a 3.
Fair.
The second half is like a 9.
I have to agree with it. I do. I have to agree with it. Yeah, we're all adopted into God's family. We hope this episode gave you guys some good things to talk about. Yeah, I think I have to agree with your rating, Nick. Oh, I do have to point out, too, there was a 4-year-old that sat behind me when I went to this movie.
Yeah, not good. We didn't talk about that in the beginning like we usually do. I don't know.
4-year-old.
What do
He
you?
was
Yeah.
4. He had to be 4. He kicked the back of my seat a couple of times. I wasn't too happy, but he was 4, and his sister was probably 5 or 6.
Yeah, I would not. Yeah, not a good idea. I would recommend not letting young kids go see this at all.
I would
And
say what, 13, 12, 13 or higher?
I would say, yeah.
Older?
I was in my head. The number I was going to is 14.
14.
Yeah, because there's a lot more cussing and everything than even in the first one.
I bet you if we went back and we looked at the movie theater that I sat in, there was a 4-year-old, because he was older than my boy. There was probably a 4-year-old, a 5 or 6-year-old, and probably 2 or 3 9-year-olds.
Yeah,
There were a lot of kids at that movie.
I wouldn't. I mean, parents, you make a decision based on what you think is right, but I think that would be a negative decision to make. Yeah.
I agree.
I think that's probably
There's
not the best.
too many curse words, lots of violence, peril.
And I mean, they're blue aliens, but there's even
just a nudity,
scene of brief nudity.
Yeah, modesty kind of ideas.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, I would frown upon that decision. My kids won't go see it until they're 13 or 14. We always preface that by saying the maturity of the kid matters, but a 4-year-old can't be mature enough to watch that movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So just protect your kids. Go back to what we talked about on, creating safe spaces for your kids within the family, and I don't know, just make good, wise, godly parenting decisions on what content your kids consume. So instead of sending them to Avatar, have them watch the WatchWell podcast on YouTube, and you can listen to it on your favorite podcast platform. We haven't decided the next movie yet. We're gonna get through this Christmas season and New Year's, and we will post on the Facebook page. So make sure that you follow us on social media. Make sure that you're all set up there. Join the conversations. We want to help you teach others to view the lens of truth while using stories. We will see you next time.